There's just no two ways about it. No generation of Americans face bigger challenges related to the environmental issues and the continuing march of global climate change than the youngest members of our population. And that's precisely why the League of Conservation Voters of New Hampshire, the vaunted Hubbard Brook Research Foundation, and the Irving Institute for Energy and Society at Dartmouth College have joined together to sponsor the 2024 Youth Forum on Climate Action and Clean Energy, scheduled for Thursday, January 18th of 2024. The gathering is a youth-focused forum at the intersection of public policy, climate action, and the clean energy economy. And through this in-person event, New Hampshire students will have the opportunity to engage with policy and corporate leaders, celebrated authors, peers who are taking action on their own level, philanthropists, and entrepreneurs to explore opportunities for. So today we're going to be speaking with two very important leaders. Rob Werner of the League of Conservation Voters for New Hampshire, and Kate Burgess of the National Conference of Environmental Legislators. Kate works with environmental leaders throughout the nation on environmental issues, especially around biodiversity and climate change, and particularly is interested in how we help young people to become more engaged in the process. So we're going to talk about both the upcoming conference, but also about some of the most important issues that young people need to be thinking about with Kate and Rob. So here's my interview with Rob Werner and Kate Burgess. We're going to talk about this 2024 Youth Forum on climate action and clean energy to try and get a little more attention for it. And I have the great pleasure of having two extraordinary friends of the podcast and friends of mine, Rob Werner and Kate Burgess, who sort of represent, I think, the bookends of the process that we're going to be engaging in here. Kate works with national legislators, state and local folks on climate issues and environmental issues. And Rob is the head of the New Hampshire League of Conservation Voters. And both of them have really focused a lot of their energy on working with young people. And so I was really excited to hear about this forum, and I just wanted to get them on to talk a little bit about why it's so important. And let me just start with one quick story. About 5 years ago, I spoke at the climate strike that we had that one day, and the first thing that I did was to look at the crowd and say to the young people there, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we dropped the ball on this. The older people, uh, we we did a lot of good stuff, but this one we really blew it. So we need you more than anything else." So I want to start by saying to me, it's just a critical component of resolving these problems that are ahead of us that we involve young people in that process. And Rob, maybe you can start by just telling us a little bit about the history behind this forum and when it is and what's the plan.
Well, sure. Actually, in 2020, a group of organizations came together to convene a youth climate and clean energy forum right before the New Hampshire primary almost 4 years ago now. And those groups are ourselves, the League of Conservation Voters, Hubbard Brook Research Foundation, and the and Dartmouth College, various institutes at Dartmouth College, the Revers Center for Energy at Tuck School at Dartmouth, and Irving Center for Energy Society at Dartmouth. So we convened a forum in 2020 where most of the presidential candidates came through and spent time talking about their priorities, their issues around clean energy and climate. And the important thing about it was that the students were the ones who were front and center, both high school students and college students were the ones asking the questions of the candidates. And we helped train them and gave them some, talking points and worked with them in terms of their questions and maybe some presentation skill. But after that, we really went into the background because it was the students that were up on the stage asking the questions of the candidates. We had a really great time. We had a big crowd. It was in downtown Concord at the new Bank of New Hampshire stage, which is a wonderful venue. Used to be the old movie theater in downtown Concord. And we had lots of national, local, and regional media there. A lot of the students had the opportunity to be interviewed by the New York Times and CNN and Boston Globe. And so that was exciting for them. So as we looked forward to this cycle, we decided we wanted to do this again in terms of convening a summit focused on climate and clean energy, but again, very much involving young voices. But it's more policy oriented this time around. We do expect some candidates will arrive, but we decided that we're going to be delving into particular areas of policy, whether that's winter sports and outdoor recreation and the outdoor economy, public health and climate, innovation and natural solutions. And we're going to cap off the day with a discussion about solutions and protecting democracy, because protecting democracy is really key to everything else we're going to be talking about in most, not only these areas, but so many areas. We'll have a mix of national, regional, state folks, but the model is the same in terms of the student involvement and the students up there really engaging with these folks that are involved in these particular areas. So we have a lot coming together. We have a lot of asks out for some national folks. We're hopeful. We're getting good signals. But as you know, working sometimes in this organizational event and political realm, you don't get quick answers, and then all of a sudden things come together towards the end. So that's what we're working towards. But we have a lot of folks involved already. So
now young people who want to participate in this, they can attend, correct? Or I mean,
they can definitely attend. In fact, I will have a registration link within the next 24 hours or so. And then what we're doing with students is that we are sending out information to professors and some of the students that have worked with us in the past, and folks that are connected to students, particularly on college campuses and some high schools that we work with, and soliciting sort of interest from students, because each panel will have three sort of content experts, if you want to call it that, and then 3 students. So we're looking for, and then the sort of the capstone what I'm talking about in terms of solutions to democracy will also have some students involved with that. So we're really looking for like 15 or so students that would be up on the stage involved. But then we want a lot of different students to come to join us, and it's certainly not limited to students. Last time we had a lot of different folks, clean energy advocates, energy committee folks, a lot of state legislators, community leaders. So it's a big mixed crowd, which is what we want.
Is there any way for people to participate if they can't come to Concord?
It'll be live streamed.
It will be. Okay.
Yes.
So You'll send me the information about that so I can put
Absolutely.
that up with this.
But
Good.
this, again, this program is purposefully timed in between the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary in order to take advantage of national media being in town, so to speak, and trying to grab their attention. So,
Yeah. Kate, you've recently made the move from Colorado to the east these days, I believe. At least last I heard from you, you were in the Washington, D.C. area. Do you find that legislators and other local officials are more sensitive to involving young people these days in these kinds of questions, or is that something we still need to really work on them about?
I think that's a gap. I'm seeing attention by community leaders and grassroots leaders, but in terms of the state and federal decision makers, I think that's something that we could be pushing them more on. And speaking of community leaders, a very good friend of mine, Angel Pena, who's the ED of a group called Nuestra Tierra, he always says policy without people is nothing more than a piece of paper. And I would match that and raise you on Angel, because I think policy without young people is nothing more than a piece of paper. And they're the next generation of grassroots leaders, advocates, governors, legislators. And so I think they are the most crucial demographic to be including in this, especially because getting them to the polls is going to be the way that we kind of seismically shift governance in this country. And so I think that's something we could be pushing our state and federal officials more on, is engaging youth and seeing them as legitimate stakeholders in this process.
Right. Well, you're talking to somebody who believes that not only is Vivek wrong about raising the voting age, but we need to lower it to 16, in my opinion, to enfranchise kids earlier, young people earlier in the process. And I just did an op-ed about that and had really good response to it, not just from young people. So I was glad to hear that. But what are the areas, Kate, where you see sort of the most action right now on the local level for young people, where young people can get involved?
I mean,
pretty
Rob
broad.
is role modeling it super well. Like just the whole concept of governance being a climate issue, climate being a governance issue, and kind of identifying links between democracy and climate change is huge. And so the climate space is pretty saturated, I think, with climate advocates. And I will also say that I think there's space for more youth to be involved in the like biodiversity crisis side of things. I was just on a call yesterday with about 7 legislators from all across the US, which is a small group talking about carnivore coexistence and biodiversity issues. And the small group is a result of, I think, the lack of general attention on wildlife and biodiversity issues, and seeing kind of the biodiversity crisis as a sister crisis to climate. And so I think that's an opportunity for youth to get more involved. And as I'm watching COP28 that's happening right now, I'm not seeing a lot of headlines about wildlife, biodiversity, coexistence, and that crisis. And so would want to make a plug that I think the climate space is pretty saturated with lots of youth advocates, and we could use some more help on the conservation side too.
And that doesn't, you're not just really talking about the biodiversity of wildlife, but we're talking about agriculture and many areas where there's going to be real need in the future for young people to be involved.
Yeah, it's not just saving the polar bear, but it's about preventing wildlife trafficking, which leads to wildlife disease, which leads to the pandemic like we had a few years ago, or strengthening our State Endangered Species Act.
Yep.
Yeah, we all know that when there's more biodiversity, we're all healthier. So,
yeah, and you're right when you say that Rob is modeling it. It used to be that Rob would tell people he knew me, Now it's the other way around. Oh yeah, I know Rob Werner.
I'm hearing
So,
his name a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
I am too. He's a hero here in New Hampshire. And I'm pretty proud of that.
Well, thank you. One of the things that it's not always easy to do, but we're going to try to do more of it is that, our legislature, particularly in New Hampshire, as you well know, demographically is, on the older side. And they don't, in the typical public hearing on things, you don't get a lot of young voices coming before the legislature. And we're going to try a bit more. We're going to revisit that this session to try to get some things going on that. Representative Matt Wilhelm from here in Manchester is actually introducing or reintroducing his bill to create sort of a youth climate corps concept. Maine has a program that's up and running now. And they're going to be coming over and actually being part of this youth forum in one of our sessions. So we're going to try to take another crack at that here in New Hampshire and get that up and running. And obviously the White House is involved in terms of their launch of the climate core concept, and that's helpful. So that's another way that we can sort of message and have young people carry the ball, so to speak, in terms of talking about how they can be involved and why they should be involved.
Excellent. Are there other initiatives, Kate, that you're hearing about that are particularly exciting?
Yeah. This was started, I think, like 15 years ago. It's called Wild Friends in New Mexico. And it's a program started by a friend of mine, Ruth Musgrave, who's now the Senior Natural Resources Advisor in Governor Inslee's office in Washington. And the program is getting, I think, second to fifth graders involved in drafting a bill focused on some pertinent wildlife or conservation adjacent issue in New Mexico. They've done stuff on xeriscaping, restricting pesticides, etc., and then bringing all of those kids into the Capitol and testifying in front of their state legislators. And I believe they've had pretty strong success in getting these bills and resolutions passed. And so kids from a really early age are getting used to what it looks, feels, and sounds like to be advocating something that they believe in. And so that's a really young youth example that I would love to see other states pilot. But yeah, Rob, you're spot on that Maine has a really great example. And then with the rollout of the Indian Youth Service Corps, I think there's going to be a lot of great examples of how Native youth are advocating for issues across the country too. So I think that'll be one to watch.
Well, yeah, thanks for that. I'd like to follow up with you on that a little bit. We're hopeful that EPA Administrator Regan will be our keynote speaker at this event. They actually reached out to our LCV National folks in advance of the announcement of their youth panel. And one of the folks on that youth panel is from Massachusetts. And there was an event I think you might be familiar with, Kate, that happened a couple of weeks ago in DC, where Senator Sanders was there with the EPA administrator unveiling this youth cabinet. So we're hopeful that this Massachusetts member might be able to come up and be part of it, our event with Administrator Regan. And we just want to again lift up those voices. So.
Well, there's nothing that melts the hearts of grandmas and grandpas who are legislators than young people. I want you to know that the New Hampshire Moose Plate was my bill years ago, and I only introduced it because a bunch of fourth graders came to me and said, "We want to have a moose plate," and so it ended up being a great way to raise funds for conservation.
Well, I'll think of you every time I see the moose plate, Wayne.
That's right. I have one on my car, so thank you.
Yeah. So the 2024 Youth Forum on Climate Action and Clean Energy is scheduled for January 18th. We'll make sure that there'll be a link to the live stream so that if you can't make it in person, you can live stream it, but you can go to the forum on the 18th, and we encourage that. And Rob, thank you very much for joining us today. Kate, thank you very much. You guys are great. and I'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, Wayne. Good luck, Rob.
Thanks.